Hello, good evening or good afternoon. Welcome to our Red Tara practice and contemplation group. Hope everybody's well tonight, this afternoon, wherever you may be, morning. There's quite an interesting question here to start our contemplation. What takes place in the mind of an older person who is in the process of dementia? If the mind is everlasting and constant, what about my mother, who appears to have lost her mind? Rinpoche answers, in this case, you are referring to mental faculties, not the nature of mind. The mind itself has no substance, but is joined with the physical body and the subtle body, which consists of subtle channels and energies. When the physical body is not well, for example, when it is sick or old, our mental faculties can become impaired. The ordinary mind becomes very dull, or irrational emotions arise. But mind's nature does not change. For example, even if a stroke causes paralysis and hinders one's speech or thought, that nature remains unchanged. On the other hand, when the physical body is strong and the subtle energies flow smoothly, we have greater mental acuity. In meditation, we use specific postures to keep the subtle channels straight so that these energies can move freely. This enhances our mental faculties. It's interesting. I was just talking to my friend Lara, and we were talking about this same phenomena of people getting old, aging, and losing their mental faculties. And I had the experience personally of my mother going through this process last year. And it was very interesting to observe it up close and in person, because a lot of my mother's friends didn't come to visit my mother anymore. A few did, but most of them stopped going to see her. And when they would see me or my sister, they would say, yes, it's so sad, your mother's not there anymore. And, of course, we're just polite. We don't disagree with them. We say, yeah. But I felt my mother was very present. But it wasn't her witty, intellectual side that was present, her gift of conversation or telling good stories, but her essence was very present. And in one way, when people go through this process of dementia, the intellectual and conceptual mind is peeled away like an onion. And then what's behind those layers starts to shine more brightly. In some people's case, there's a tendency towards being belligerent or being very angry. In others people's case, there's a tendency towards being very peaceful and very loving. I was very fortunate in my mother's case that she became more and more loving, more and more peaceful. But there were a handful of people at her facility that were extremely difficult and aggressive and angry. Ultimately, we identify very strongly with the intellectual conceptual mind. But this intellectual conceptual mind is one of the aggregates that does fall away. All of us will go through this same type of dissolution. In the same way that when you're dying and your body feels very heavy and you can't lift up your arms or your head, the earth element is dissolving. Or if you have an insatiable thirst or you can't hold your urine anymore, the water element is dissolving. Or if you can't catch your breath, the wind element is dissolving. In the same way, the conceptual cognitive mind element also dissolves. It does not always dissolve in a sequential order. So in the case of people that have dementia or Alzheimer's, senility as we used to call it, their cognitive element is dissolving before or simultaneously with the other elements. And it can be very frightening, but to people that have practiced meditation during their lifetime, we don't identify as much with that intellectual, conceptual part of ourselves. We identify with something more profound, more deep, where we can rest our mind in mind's essence and just let the concepts and intellectual mind go by. At the moment of death, if we can abide in that nature of mind, there's a chance to attain enlightenment. They call that the bardo of clear light. And when I saw my mother and her roommates sitting there, I could see there was not a lot of intellectual activity occurring in their minds. They just kind of sat like this. But I also could see that they had not been trained during their lifetime to recognize the nature of mind. So even if they're sort of abiding in a quiet, calm place, if it's not recognized, it's just kunji. If it's recognized, it becomes rikpa. So during our lifetime, we train to recognize this state beyond the intellectual mind, beyond the conceptual mind. And then when that dissolution occurs, whether it be while we're alive or after we've stopped breathing, we will recognize that as our Buddha nature and have a great opportunity to rest in that mind, that Buddha mind.